Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Naruto never became a shinobi and ran a ramen shop. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The darkness before dawn had always belonged to the shinobi. Naruto Uzumaki had learned this truth the hard way, during those years when he'd stumbled through Konoha's empty streets at 4 in the morning. Desperate to prove himself through extra training that his body, and his damaged chakra network, could no longer sustain. Back then, the pre-dawn hours had tasted like failure, like watching shadows of ANBU flicker across rooftops while he remained earthbound, forever grounded. But that was 7 years ago. Now, at 19, Naruto had claimed these quiet hours for himself, though for an entirely different purpose. The darkness before dawn no longer belonged solely to the shinobi. It also belonged to the ramen maker, and there was a strange poetry in that which he'd only recently begun to appreciate. The single lantern hanging above Ichiraku's preparation counter cast warm, amber light across his workstation as Naruto hefted the massive stockpot onto the burner. His movements were economical, practiced, the result of thousands of repetitions that had carved these motions into his muscle memory, as surely as kata did for taijutsu practitioners. The pot settled with a satisfying thunk against the grate. 4 a.m. Right on schedule. Naruto's hands, calloused now from knife work and burns rather than kunai and training, moved through the familiar ritual. Cold water first, filled to exactly 3 fingers below the pot's rim. He didn't need to measure anymore. His body knew. Tsuchiya had taught him that cooking, real cooking, wasn't about following recipes like mission parameters. It was about understanding ingredients so intimately that you could feel when something was right. The broth is the soul of the ramen, the old man had told him on his first day, over 7 years ago, when Naruto had been a broken 12-year-old who could barely look anyone in the eye. Everything else, the noodles, the toppings, the seasoning, they're important, sure. But the broth? That's where the heart lives. You can taste love in a good broth, Naruto. You can taste patience. And people, whether they know it or not, they're hungry for both. At the time, Naruto hadn't understood. He'd been too raw, too angry at the world and at himself. The accident had been 3 months past, and the reality that he would never become Hokage, that he would never even become a genin, was still a fresh wound that throbbed with every breath. But Tsuchi had been patient. He'd put Naruto to work doing simple tasks, washing dishes, cleaning tables, chopping green onions. And every morning, without fail, he'd shown Naruto how to make the broth. See how the water's just starting to think about boiling? Tsuchi would say, his weathered hand hovering above the pot. That's when you add the bones. Not before, not after. Timing matters. Naruto reached for the container of pork bones he'd prepared the night before, split lengthwise to expose the marrow, blanched to remove impurities. The bones clicked against each other, as he transferred them to the pot, arranging them carefully to ensure even heat distribution. Next came the chicken carcasses, then the aromatics, ginger sliced thick as coins, green onion tops he'd saved from yesterday's prep, a handful of garlic cloves still in their papery skins. The water began its slow climb toward a boil, and Naruto settled onto his stool to wait. This was the part he'd come to love most, the waiting. The watching. In his previous life, the one he'd lost at 12, he'd been all explosive energy and impatience. He'd wanted everything immediately, wanted to skip the boring parts and jump straight to being strong, being acknowledged, being enough. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd found acknowledgement in the waiting. Steam began to rise from the pot, carrying with it the first whispers of scent, mineral-rich bone, sweet aromatics, the promise of umami depth to come. Naruto leaned forward, elbows on knees, and watched the surface of the water begin to shiver. Small bubbles formed at the bottom of the pot, rising slowly like tiny glass spheres. His mind drifted, as it often did during these quiet hours. Stay still, Naruto. Stop squirming or I can't get an accurate reading. Sakura's voice, tight with frustration and something that might have been concern. Her hands glowing green with medical chakra, pressed against his abdomen where his chakra coils were densest, or had been, before the accident. It feels weird, Sakura-chan, he'd complained, though he tried to stay still. This was 2 weeks after the incident, and Tsunade Bachan herself had already declared his case beyond even her considerable skill. But Sakura, newly minted as a medical ninja apprentice, had been determined to try. Weird how? She'd asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. Like there's something there, but it's behind a wall. Or underwater. Distant. Sakura's expression had shuddered, and he'd known the answer before she spoke. The pathways are intact, she'd said carefully, pulling her hands back. But they're like roads after an earthquake, Naruto. Still there, but broken in so many places that nothing can travel them properly. You might be able to mold a tiny amount of chakra, but not enough to be a shinobi. He'd finished the sentence himself, voice flat. I'm sorry. And she had been, genuinely. He could see it in her eyes, the way they'd gone bright with unshed tears. I'm so sorry, Naruto. A sharp hiss from the pot yanked Naruto back to the present. The water had reached a full boil, bubbles breaking the surface in earnest now. He stood, grabbed his spider skimmer, and began the meditative work of removing the scum that rose to the top. Gray foam collected in the mesh, and he scraped it into the waste bowl with practiced efficiency. Skim, scrape, skim, scrape. The rhythm was soothing. Once the surface was clear, he reduced the heat to maintain a bare simmer, just a few lazy bubbles breaking the surface every second. Too hot and the broth would become cloudy, aggressive. Too cool and the bones wouldn't surrender their essence. It was a balance, like everything in life. Unlike his previous dream, though, this was a balance he could actually achieve. Naruto set the timer, 6 hours for the first stage, and moved to his next task, prep work for the day's service. He pulled out his cutting board, a heavy wooden block worn smooth by years of use, and selected his knife from the magnetic strip on the wall. The blade caught the lantern light as he tested its edge against his thumb. Sharp. Good. The green onions were first, a small mountain of them waiting in their container. Naruto's knife began to move, finding the rhythm that Tsuchi had drilled into him. Tap 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 against the board, the blade rocking in that specific way that produced perfectly uniform slices. His left hand curled properly, knuckles forward to guide the blade, fingertips safely tucked back. You've got good hands for this, Tsuchi had told him once, watching him work. Strong, but you're learning to be gentle too. That's rare. Naruto had ducked his head at the compliment, embarrassed and pleased in equal measure. Compliments had been rare in his life, especially after the accident. People either pitied him, or had forgotten him entirely, and he wasn't sure which was worse. But in the kitchen, his hands were enough. More than enough. The green onions gave way to bamboo shoots, which required more careful knife work. Naruto lost himself in the precision of it, cutting each shoot into thin strips of exact width. Next came the char siu pork he'd roasted yesterday afternoon, slicing it against the grain into pieces that would be tender enough to pull apart with chopsticks. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, that gradual shift from black to deep blue that signaled dawn's approach. Naruto could hear Konoha waking around him, the distant footsteps of early rising civilians heading to open their own shops, the soft thud of newspaper delivery, the first birds beginning their morning songs. The village sounded different when you weren't part of the shinobi world, he'd discovered. Civilians moved to a different rhythm, one governed by sunrise and sunset rather than mission schedules and training rotations. It had taken him years to adjust to this pace, to stop flinching every time he heard rapid footfalls, to stop scanning rooftops for threats that weren't his concern anymore. Now, the civilian rhythm was his rhythm. The shop's rhythm. Ichiraku opened at 11 a.m. for lunch service, which meant IM would arrive around 9:30 to help with the final preparations. Tsuchiya came in less frequently these days. His arthritis had worsened over the past year, and Naruto had finally convinced him to take a proper retirement. Semi-retirement, the old man had insisted stubbornly, still showing up 3 or 4 times a week to supervise and offer suggestions that were really commands in disguise. Naruto didn't mind. This was still Tsuchi's shop, his legacy. Naruto was just the custodian, the one fortunate enough to have been offered a lifeline when he was drowning. The memory surfaced unbidden, as it often did during these quiet hours, 3 months after the accident. Naruto sitting alone in his apartment, staring at the academy textbooks he could no longer use. The scroll with the Hokage's apology for his unfortunate incident during training and a modest settlement payment. The silence, which had become his only companion. A knock on the door. Unexpected. Tucci had stood in the hallway, hands clasped in front of him, looking uncomfortable but determined. Naruto, he'd said. Can an old man come in for a moment? They'd sat at Naruto's tiny table, and Tucci had gotten straight to the point. I need help at the shop, he'd said. I am's good, but she can't be there every hour we're open. I'm getting older, and the work is getting harder. I was thinking, maybe you'd be interested in learning the trade? Naruto had stared at him, uncomprehending. Me? You? Tucci's expression had been kind but serious. I've known you since you were barely tall enough to see over the counter, Naruto. You've got something important. You care about people. You notice when regulars change their usual order, when someone's having a bad day. That matters in this work. I don't know anything about cooking. The objection had been automatic, hollow. That's what learning is for. Tucci had leaned forward. Look, I'm not offering this out of pity. I'm offering because I think you'd be good at it, and because I genuinely need the help. But I'll be honest with you, it's hard work. Early mornings, late nights, burns and cuts, feet aching, steam in your face. It's not glamorous like being a shinobi. Something had flickered in Naruto's chest at those words. Not hope, not yet. But maybe the shadow of possibility. Why? He'd asked, voice cracking. Why do you believe I could do this? Tucci had smiled then, warm and genuine. Because you never gave up, even when the whole village made it hard for you. That kind of stubbornness? That's exactly what you need to perfect a broth that takes 12 hours to make. That's what you need to serve customers with a smile even on your worst day. You've always had strength, Naruto. Just maybe a different kind than you thought. The timer chimed, pulling Naruto back to the present. He blinked, surprised to find his eyes damp. Even after all these years, that memory could still grab him by the throat. He checked the broth. The liquid had taken on a milky opacity, fat and collagen beginning to emulsify into the water. Perfect. He added more hot water to replace what had evaporated, then settled it back into its gentle simmer. 6 more hours to go. Naruto stretched, his back popping, and moved to start the tear, the concentrated seasoning sauce that would be added to each bowl. This was where the art really lived, Tucci said. The broth was foundation, but the tear was personality. He pulled out the container of soy sauce he'd made himself last year, fermented for months until it developed that perfect depth. To this he added sake, mirin, a touch of sugar, dried sardines, kombu, and his secret ingredient, a blend of spices he'd developed through years of experimentation. The mixture went into a small pot to steep and reduce. The preparation work continued as the sun fully rose, golden light beginning to stream through the shop's front opening. Naruto worked steadily through his checklist, soft boiling eggs for the ajitsuke tamago, preparing the menma, portioning out servings of fresh noodles that he'd made yesterday afternoon. Making ramen wasn't a single task. It was an orchestration of dozens of small tasks, each one essential, each one requiring its own form of mastery. You could spend years perfecting just the eggs, getting that exact level of jammy yolk, the way the soy marinade penetrated the white. You could spend a lifetime on the broth, and still find new subtleties to explore. There was something deeply satisfying about that. Progress you could measure in increments, skill that built steadily over time rather than in explosive bursts. So different from the shinobi path, where you might train for months and see no improvement, then suddenly unlock a new jutsu in a moment of desperation. Not that he thought about that much anymore. That was a lie. But it was a lie he told himself most mornings, and some days he almost believed it. By the time Ayame arrived at 9:30, Naruto had most of the prep work completed. She breezed in with her characteristic energy, already tying her apron on. Morning, Naruto. How's the broth? Morning, Ayame-san. Broth's good, should be ready by 10. He glanced up from the eggs he was peeling. Your dad coming in today? He said he might stop by this afternoon. She washed her hands and immediately began helping with the eggs, her movements as practiced as his own. His hands were bothering him this morning. Naruto frowned. Is he using the ointment Sakura-chan recommended? You know how stubborn he is. Ayame smiled, but there was concern in her eyes. He says it smells weird. I'll talk to him. Naruto added the peeled eggs to the marinade, watching them sink into the dark liquid. Maybe Sakura can make a different formula. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that came from years of partnership. Had been patient with him too, in those early days when he'd barely been able to look at her without being reminded of all the times he'd sat at this counter dreaming of being Hokage while she served him ramen. She treated him as a colleague from day one, never with pity, and he'd always been grateful for that. So said casually, too casually, I heard Sakura stopped by at the end of service last night. How did that go? Naruto kept his eyes on his work, slicing nori into thin strips. Fine. She just wanted to check in. Naruto. What? He glanced up to find her giving him that look, the one that said she could see right through him. You know you can talk to me, right? If it's hard, having her try to heal you all the time. It's not hard, Naruto interrupted, then sighed. Okay, maybe it's a little hard. But she's trying to help. She feels bad about what happened, even though it wasn't her fault. Guilt isn't logical. Began arranging the prep containers in order for service. Neither is grief. Naruto was saved from responding by a knock on the counter. They both looked up to find one of their regulars, Ginma, a Tokubetsu Jonin who always had a saban needle in his mouth and an easy smile. You're early, Naruto said, but he was already moving toward the serving side. We don't open for another hour. I know. Ginma held up his hands in mock surrender. But I've got a mission briefing at 11, and I had a feeling I'd be craving your miso ramen all day if I didn't get a bowl first. Any chance you could make an exception for a desperate shinobi? Naruto pretended to consider it, then grinned. I suppose we could make an exception. Mizan? I'll get the noodles, she called, already moving. This was another thing Naruto had learned. Rules were important, but people were more important. A good ramen shop wasn't just about the food. It was about reading the customer, understanding what they needed. Sometimes they needed you to follow the rules strictly, to give them the comfort of routine. Sometimes they needed you to bend a little, to show them they mattered enough for an exception. Genma settled onto a stool, and Naruto began the familiar dance of assembly. Tear in the bowl first, measured precisely. A ladle of the rich, creamy broth. The scent alone was enough to make Genma sigh with anticipation. The noodles went into the basket, dropped into the boiling water for exactly 90 seconds. While they cooked, Naruto arranged the toppings, char siu, menma, the soft-boiled egg sliced in half to reveal its golden center, green onions, a scatter of sesame seeds. The noodles finished, and he drained them expertly, the steam billowing up around his face as he transferred them to the bowl. Miso ramen, extra char siu, Naruto announced, sliding the bowl across the counter. You remembered the extra. Genma's smile was genuine as he broke apart his disposable chopsticks. I don't even have to ask anymore. You've been ordering the same thing for 3 years, Naruto said dryly. I'd be a pretty poor ramen chef if I didn't remember. Genma took his first bite, and Naruto watched with the quiet satisfaction that never got old. The way the man's eyes closed, the small sound of contentment, the visible relaxation in his shoulders. This was feedback you could see, immediate and honest. You couldn't fake a reaction to good food. Perfect, Genma said after swallowing. I swear, Naruto, this is the best part of my morning. You know how many missions I've gotten through by thinking about getting back to this counter? Something warm unfurled in Naruto's chest. Yeah, absolutely. There was this one time in Rain Country, miserable place, rain every damn day, and I kept telling myself, just get through this, and you can have Ichiraka's miso ramen. Genma took another bite, this time getting noodles, broth, and pork in one perfect mouthful. Got me through 2 weeks of surveillance. I'm honored to be your motivation, Naruto said, and meant it. They chatted while Genma ate, the easy conversation of long acquaintance. Genma mentioned that Kakashi had finally been strong-armed into taking a teaching position at the academy, which made Naruto laugh. That's going to be interesting. He was supposed to be my Jonin instructor, you know. Before the accident? Genma's expression sobered slightly. Yeah. Naruto wiped down the counter, keeping his hands busy. Sometimes I wonder what that would have been like. But it doesn't do any good to wonder. Probably would have driven you crazy with his lateness, Genma offered, clearly trying to lighten the mood. The man's chronically 3 hours late to everything. Some things don't change, huh? Genma finished his ramen, drinking the last of the broth directly from the bowl with obvious pleasure. He set it down with a satisfied sigh and pulled out his wallet. What do I owe you? On the house, Naruto said. Early service, emergency ramen, can't charge for that. Naruto, I insist. Besides, you're going on a mission. Come back safe and you can pay double for your next bowl. Genma studied him for a moment, then smiled. You're a good man, Naruto Uzumaki. Don't let anyone tell you different. He stood, stretched, and headed for the exit. I'll hold you to that double price. After he left, I came to stand beside Naruto. You know you can't give away free ramen to everyone. I know. But he's going on a mission and… Naruto trailed off, not sure how to explain the complicated tangle of feelings. Pride that a Jonin trusted him enough to make his food part of his mission preparation. Longing for the adventure he'd never have. Gratitude that he could contribute something, even if it was just a good memory to sustain someone in Rain Country. I know, said softly, patting his shoulder. I know. The rest of the morning passed quickly as they finished preparations and officially opened at 11. The lunch rush started almost immediately. Ichiraku Ramen had built a reputation over the decades, and Naruto's apprenticeship had only strengthened it. Where Tuchi's ramen had been traditional and comforting, Naruto had begun adding his own innovations, experimental broths, seasonal specials, fusion toppings that shouldn't work but somehow did. It's because you're not afraid to fail, Tuchi had told him when Naruto's first attempt at a curry ramen had been a disaster. You try things, and when they don't work, you figure out why and try again. That's how you grow. It had taken Naruto a moment to realize that Tuchi was talking about more than just ramen. The lunch crowd was the usual mix: civilians from the surrounding shops, off-duty Chunin and Jonin, academy instructors on their break. Naruto and fell into their rhythm, the familiar dance of taking orders, cooking, serving, clearing, repeating. The shop filled with steam and conversation, the sound of slurping noodles and satisfied sighs. Naruto loved this part. The energy of service, the connection with customers. Each bowl was a small conversation, a moment of care. He noticed the small things: the genin who always sat in the far corner alone, trauma from a mission, Naruto guessed, someone who needed to watch the exits, the elderly couple who shared a single bowl, but he always made sure to add extra toppings, the academy student who saved all her allowance to come once a week and always ordered the cheapest option. He'd accidentally given her extra char siu every time. This was his village now. Not the shinobi world of missions and combat, but the civilian world of daily life and small kindnesses. He protected no one from invasion, sealed no demons, won no dramatic battles, but he'd fed people. Thousands of them over the years. He'd given them comfort, warmth, a moment of peace in their day. He'd learned their names, their orders, their stories. It was enough. Most days, it was enough. The lunch rush had mostly cleared when the door curtain shifted and Sakura stepped in. Naruto's heart did its familiar complicated twist, part happiness at seeing his old friend, part pain at the reminder of everything that had changed between them. Sakura-chan. He smiled, genuine despite the complicated feelings. Lunch break? Just finished a surgery, actually. She settled onto a stool, and Naruto noticed the signs of exhaustion. The tightness around her eyes, the way her shoulders drooped slightly. It went well, but it was a long one. I'm starving. The usual? Please. Naruto began preparing her order. Shoyu ramen with extra vegetables, light on the pork. She'd become a regular visitor over the years, though the nature of her visits had changed. At first, she'd come out of what he suspected was pity, or maybe guilt. But gradually, it had become something more genuine. They'd built a new kind of friendship, one that didn't rely on old team dynamics that had never actually formed. Still, there were moments. Glances that lingered too long on his hands as they worked, sadness flickering across her face when she thought he wasn't looking. She blamed herself, he knew, even though the accident had nothing to do with her. How's the hospital? He asked as he worked, keeping the conversation light. Busy. We've got an increase in missions lately. Something about tensions with Cloud. She paused. Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about that. It's fine, Sakura-chan. It's not like I don't know missions happen. He slid her bowl across the counter. I just don't go on them. She winced at his tone. He'd aimed for light but had landed somewhere closer to bitter. Damn it, Naruto, it's okay. He busied himself wiping down the counter. Really? Tell me about the surgery. What was it? Sakura studied him for a moment, clearly debating whether to push, then seemed to decide to let it go. Shattered femur from a training accident. The genin got overconfident during taijutsu sparring. She took a bite of her ramen, made a small sound of pleasure. This is perfect. Thank you. They fell into easier conversation after that, Sakura telling him about the hospital's latest dramas, Naruto sharing a story about a customer who'd proposed to his girlfriend at the ramen counter last week. It was comfortable, familiar. Then Sakura set down her chopsticks and said, I've been studying some new techniques. Naruto's hands stilled. Sakura, just listen. She leaned forward, earnest. There's a medical specialist from the land of water who's developed a procedure for chakra network damage. It's experimental, but the results are promising. I've been exchanging letters with her, and she thinks that with your specific type of injury. No. The word came out harder than he'd intended, and Sakura flinched. You don't even know what I was going to say. I know exactly what you're going to say. Naruto forced himself to meet her eyes. You're going to say there's a chance. Maybe a small one, but a chance. Some new technique, some experimental procedure, and I'll get my hopes up, and we'll try it, and it won't work. And I'll have to grieve all over again. But what if it does work? It won't. He said it quietly, with the certainty of someone who'd been through this exact conversation a dozen times. Sakura-chan, I know you mean well. I know you want to help, but I need you to hear me. I'm okay. This life, this shop, it's not my first choice, but it's mine. And every time you try to fix me, it's like you're saying this isn't enough. Sakura's eyes filled with tears. That's not what I mean, I know. He reached across the counter and squeezed her hand briefly. I know. But that's how it feels. She wiped at her eyes angrily. I just hate that it happened to you. Of all people, you wanted to be Hokage so badly. You had so much potential, had. Naruto smiled, but it felt fragile. Past tense. And yeah, it sucks. Some days it really sucks. But I can't spend the rest of my life chasing a dream that's dead, Sakura-chan. I have to live the life I actually have. Sakura was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I feel so guilty. It wasn't your fault. I was supposed to be your teammate. If I'd been there that day, team assignments hadn't even been posted yet. You couldn't have been there. This was old ground, worn smooth by repetition. The only person responsible is Mizuki, and he's in prison where he belongs. Sakura picked up her chopsticks again, but her appetite seemed to have faded. She pushed noodles around her bowl. Do you ever think about what our team would have been like? You, me, and... She trailed off, but Naruto knew who she meant. Sasuke? Yeah. She set down the chopsticks again. I know it's stupid to think about. It's been 7 years. He made his choice to leave the village. You still care about him. It wasn't a question. I still care about both of you. She looked up, and the raw honesty in her face made Naruto's chest ache. You were my teammates, even if we never actually became a team. And I lost both of you, one to betrayal, one to an accident. Sometimes I wonder if I'm cursed. Hey! Naruto's voice was firm. You didn't lose me. I'm right here. I'm just not a shinobi. I know, but, no buts. I'm here, Sakura-chan. Different than we planned, but here. He managed a grin. And you can come eat my ramen anytime you want. Friends do that, right? She smiled then, watery but genuine. Friends do that. And for what it's worth, Naruto, your ramen really is the best in the village. Just the village? I'm aiming for best in the fire country at least. She laughed, and the tension broke. They finished her meal with lighter conversation, and when she left, she seemed less burdened. Naruto felt the familiar exhaustion that came from these interactions, the emotional labor of managing other people's guilt about his situation, but also a warmth. Sakura cared, even if her care sometimes manifested in ways that hurt. That mattered. The afternoon service was lighter than lunch, mostly civilians and the occasional genin team celebrating a successful mission. Naruto found his rhythm again, the meditation of cooking soothing the ragged edges that his conversation with Sakura had exposed. This was real. The heat of the stove, the scent of broth, the satisfaction of a perfectly assembled bowl. This was his life, and it was a good life. He almost believed it. Around 3 p.m., I am left for the day. She had a date with a civilian merchant who'd been courting her for months, and Naruto had insisted she take the evening off. He could handle the lighter dinner service alone. The shop was quiet for a while, just Naruto and the bubbling pots and the distant sounds of village life. He used the lull to clean, to prep for tomorrow, to check his broth. It had reached that perfect stage of development, rich, complex, the bones completely surrendered to the liquid. He was straining it through cheesecloth when the door curtain rustled. "Be right with you," Naruto called over his shoulder, focused on not spilling the precious liquid. Silence. No response, no footsteps, just the sense of a presence. Naruto finished transferring the broth to a clean pot and turned around. A figure sat at the counter, hooded cloak concealing their features. They sat very still, hands folded on the counter, posture suggesting patience. "Sorry about that," Naruto said, wiping his hands on his apron. "What can I get you?" The figure didn't respond immediately. Then, in a voice so quiet Naruto had to strain to hear it, "Your recommendation." Female, he thought. And something familiar about the cadence, though he couldn't place it. "Any dietary restrictions? Preferences? Whatever you think is best." It was unusual, but not unheard of. Some customers liked to put themselves in his hands, to trust his judgment. Naruto studied what little he could see of the figure, small frame, hands that looked strong but elegant where they rested on the counter, and made his decision. "Okay. Give me about 10 minutes. He moved through his kitchen with purpose, selecting ingredients with care. This was a gift, in a way, a customer trusting him completely. He wanted to honor that. He chose his newest broth, the one he'd been experimenting with, a blend of pork and chicken with kombu for depth, simmered with ginger and a touch of yuzu for brightness. The noodles he selected were his fresh-made batch from this morning, thin and delicate. For toppings, he went elegant rather than hearty. Tender char siu sliced paper thin, a perfect soft boiled egg, bamboo shoots cut into fine matchsticks, a handful of fresh mizuna for a peppery bite. The assembly was a meditation. Each element placed with intention, with care. When he finished, the bowl was a work of art, the clear, golden broth showcasing the carefully arranged toppings, the curled noodles just visible beneath the surface. "Special recommendation," Naruto said, placing it gently on the counter. "Be careful, the broth is hot." The figure reached up with one hand to pull back their hood slightly, just enough to eat, not enough for Naruto to see their face clearly. He caught a glimpse of pale skin, dark hair. She broke apart her chopsticks and took her first bite, and even though Naruto couldn't see her expression clearly, he saw the way her shoulders relaxed, the small movement of her throat as she swallowed. She ate in silence, methodical and appreciative. Naruto busied himself with other tasks, giving her privacy but staying aware. There was something almost melancholy about the way she ate, like she was savoring every bite not just for taste but for memory. When she finished, drinking the last of the broth from the bowl, which always pleased him, she set it down carefully and reached into her cloak for her wallet. "How much?" 800 ryo. She placed the exact amount on the counter, then stood. For a moment, she hesitated, and Naruto thought she might speak. But instead, she simply bowed, a formal, precise bow, and turned to leave. "Wait," Naruto called out impulsively. Did you like it?" The figure paused at the entrance. "It was perfect," she said, so softly he almost missed it. "Thank you." Then she was gone, the door curtain swaying in her wake. Naruto stared at the empty stool, at the bowl she'd left clean, at the money on the counter. Something about the encounter left him unsettled, though he couldn't say why. The voice had been familiar, the way she moved had been familiar, but he couldn't place it. He shook his head, clearing the feeling. Konoha was a big village. Probably just someone he'd seen in passing. Still, as he cleared her bowl and wiped down the counter, he found himself hoping she'd come back. The evening service continued with its usual trickle of customers, and by the time Naruto closed up at 9 p.m., he was pleasantly exhausted. His feet ached, his hands were dry from washing, and he smelled like broth and steam. It was a familiar constellation of discomfort, one that meant a day well worked. He did his closing routine by muscle memory, cleaning the kitchen, banking the coals, prepping the bones for tomorrow's broth, taking inventory. The work was soothing, putting the shop to bed like tucking in a child. Finally, he stepped outside and locked the door. The night air was cool on his overheated skin, and he tilted his face up to catch the breeze. Above, stars were beginning to emerge, and somewhere in the distance, he heard the telltale whoosh of a shinobi using rooftop travel. Once, that sound had represented everything he wanted to be. Now it was just part of the village's symphony, no more or less important than the sound of a shopkeeper closing up, a cat yowling in an alley, a couple laughing as they walked home. Naruto stood there for a moment, letting the day settle in his bones. The encounter with Genma, the complicated conversation with Sakura, the mysterious hooded customer, the dozens of other small interactions that made up his daily life. This was his world now. Smaller than the one he dreamed of, perhaps. But real. Solid. His. The broth is the soul of the ramen, Tsuchi had told him all those years ago. Naruto understood now. The broth took time, patience, the willingness to tend something carefully through its long transformation. You couldn't rush it. You couldn't force it. You could only show up every day at 4 a.m. and do the work, trusting that the result would be worth it. Maybe that was true of life, too. He turned toward home, his small apartment a few blocks away. Tomorrow he'd wake at 3:30, be at the shop by 4. He'd start the broth again, prep the ingredients again, serve the customers again. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was a good life. And if sometimes, in the quiet moments between sleep and waking, he still dreamed of orange jumpsuits and a Hokage's hat, well, everyone was entitled to their ghosts. For now, though, he had ramen to make. And that, Naruto had learned, was enough to build a life on, one bowl at a time. The hooded figure returned on Tuesday. Naruto was in the middle of evening prep, slicing daikon into perfect rounds for pickling, when the door curtain rustled and she stepped inside. He recognized her immediately by the way she moved, quiet, almost apologetic, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. "Welcome back," he said, unable to keep the note of pleasure from his voice. Something about her previous visit had stayed with him, like a half-remembered melody. "Same seat as last time?" She nodded and settled onto the same stool, hands folding on the counter in that precise way. The late afternoon light slanted through the shop's opening, but her hood was positioned to keep her face in shadow. Deliberate, Naruto thought. She wanted to remain unknown. He could respect that. The shop had always been a refuge for people who needed one. "Another recommendation?" he asked. "Or would you like to choose this time?" A pause, then, "Your choice again." "Please," that voice. So quiet, so carefully controlled. Naruto found himself studying what little he could see, the curve of her jaw just visible beneath the hood, the delicate architecture of her hands, the way she held herself with a stillness that reminded him of the Hyuga clan's rigid posture training. But it couldn't be a Hyuga. They didn't hide. They were too proud of their bloodline, too aware of their status. Besides, what would a Hyuga want with anonymity at a ramen counter? "Give me 10 minutes," he said, and set to work. This time he chose differently. Where the first bowl had been elegant and light, today felt like a day for comfort. He pulled out his heartiest miso base, the one fermented with a blend that gave it earthy depth. The broth he selected was his richest pork tonkatsu, opaque and creamy, thick noodles to stand up to the robust broth. Toppings that spoke of warmth, char siu with a cap of fat that would melt on the tongue, an egg with the yolk still liquid gold, sweet corn, a pat of butter to melt into the broth, bean sprouts for crunch. It was the kind of ramen you ate when you needed to feel grounded, when you needed to remember that good things existed in the world. When he placed it in front of her, she went very still. "Is something wrong?" Naruto asked, suddenly worried he'd misread the situation. "No." Her voice was barely audible. This was my favorite. When I was younger. Was, Naruto noted. Past tense. "You don't need it anymore?" "I haven't in a long time." She picked up her chopsticks. "I didn't think anyone would remember." "I didn't," Naruto started then stopped. He hadn't remembered, because he didn't know who she was. But somehow he'd intuited what she needed. It happened sometimes, that strange alchemy between chef and customer where you just knew. I'm glad I got it right. She ate even more slowly than last time, and Naruto found himself hyper-aware of her presence as he worked. The small sounds she made, the quiet sigh after her first taste, the way her chopsticks clicked against the bowl. He kept finding excuses to glance over, trying to piece together the mystery. A former regular who'd moved away? Someone who'd known the shop as a child? The familiarity in her voice suggested history, but he couldn't place it. It nagged at him like a forgotten name. She finished, as before, by drinking the last of the broth. When she set down the bowl, Naruto noticed her hands were trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said. Then, as if the words were pulled from somewhere deep, "It was exactly as I remembered." "You're welcome to come back anytime," Naruto offered. "If you want to keep being mysterious, that's fine. But if you ever want to tell me your name, I'm a good listener." She stood, placed her payment on the counter, exact change again, and bowed. "Maybe someday," she said so softly he almost missed it. Then she was gone, leaving Naruto with questions and the strange warmth that came from feeding someone a memory. Wednesday brought a different kind of visitor. Naruto was wiping down tables during the afternoon lull when a man in an expensive suit stepped through the curtain, looking distinctly out of place among the simple wooden furnishings. He carried a leather portfolio and had the kind of calculated smile that Naruto had learned to distrust. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice smooth as oil. "Are you Naruto Uzumaki?" "That's me." Naruto straightened, setting aside his cleaning cloth. "Can I help you?" "I certainly hope so. My name is Kobayashi, and I represent the Sunrise Development Corporation." He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the counter. "We're working on an exciting new project in this district, and your establishment has come to our attention." Naruto glanced at the card without touching it. "We're not interested in catering contracts, if that's what you're asking. We're just a small ramen shop." "Oh no, nothing like that." Kobayashi's smile widened. "We're actually interested in acquiring the property itself. We're prepared to make a very generous offer." The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Naruto felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You want to buy Ichiraku?" "We want to buy the land Ichiraku sits on," Kobayashi corrected smoothly. "This entire block, actually. We're planning a modern commercial complex, high-end restaurants, luxury apartments, shops that cater to the Shinobi elite. It's going to revitalize the entire area." "This area doesn't need revitalizing," Naruto said, keeping his voice level despite the anger beginning to simmer. "It's a thriving neighborhood with businesses that have been here for decades." "Precisely the problem." Kobayashi pulled a document from his portfolio. "These buildings are old, outdated. The infrastructure is deteriorating. Our development would bring jobs, increase property values, modernize the district." He slid the paper toward Naruto. "We're offering well above market value. You could retire comfortably, or open a new establishment in a less expensive area." Naruto looked at the paper. The number written there was staggering, more money than he'd see in a decade of running the shop. Maybe more than he'd see in his lifetime. "No," he said. Kobayashi blinked. "I'm sorry? No. We're not selling." Naruto pushed the paper back across the counter. "This shop has been here for over 30 years. Tsuchiya-san built it from nothing. People depend on it, not just for food, but because it's part of the neighborhood. It's part of Konoha's history. Mr. Uzumaki, I understand the sentimental attachment, but it's not about sentiment." Naruto met the man's eyes steadily. "It's about community. About the people who eat here every day, who bring their families, who've been coming here since they were kids. You can't put a price on that. Everyone has a price." Kobayashi's smile had cooled considerably. "Perhaps you need time to think about it. Discuss it with the actual owner, Mr. Tucci, was it?" "Tucci trusts me to make decisions about the shop," Naruto said, though his heart was pounding. This was technically true. The old man had made him de facto manager, but a decision this big. "Nevertheless, we'll be reaching out to him directly." Kobayashi tucked his papers away. "We've already secured agreements from most of the other businesses on this block. It would be unfortunate if Ichiraku was the only holdout." The implied threat hung in the air. Naruto's hands curled into fists beneath the counter. Is that all? For now. Kobayashi headed for the exit, then paused. You should know, Mr. Uzumaki, that Sunrise Development has friends in high places. This project has the backing of several influential clan heads and members of the village council. Fighting it would be unwise. After he left, Naruto stood very still, trying to control his breathing. His first instinct was the old one, the urge to chase after the man and make him understand through force that some things weren't for sale. But he wasn't that person anymore. Couldn't be that person anymore. Instead, he pulled out a stool and sat down heavily, his mind racing. They couldn't lose the shop. They couldn't. This place was everything. His livelihood, yes, but more than that. His purpose. His home. The place where he'd rebuilt himself from the ashes of his first dream. And Tucci. God, what would this do to Tucci? The old man had poured his life into this shop, had created a space that welcomed everyone when much of the village had been hostile. He'd taken in a broken kid and taught him not just to cook, but to live again. This shop was his legacy. Naruto put his head in his hands, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. Naruto? He looked up to find Ayam standing in the doorway to the kitchen, concern etched on her face. She must have heard everything. Did you know about this? He asked. She shook her head. Dad mentioned that someone had approached him about selling a few months ago, but he refused outright. He didn't think they'd come back. They came back with a bigger offer and implied threats. Naruto showed her the business card Kobayashi had left behind. What do we do? We talk to Dad, Ayam said firmly. Tonight. He needs to know this is getting serious. The hooded figure returned on Thursday. This time, Naruto was ready for her. He'd been thinking about her between customers, trying to puzzle out the mystery. The way she held her chopsticks, the precise etiquette of her movements, the almost familiar cadence of her voice. Welcome back, he said as she took her usual seat. I'm starting to think you're fond of my cooking. Was that a hint of a smile beneath the hood? Hard to say. I am, she said simply. Then maybe you could do me a favor, Naruto said, surprising himself with his boldness. Tell me something about yourself. Doesn't have to be your name. Just something. She was quiet for a long moment, and he thought she might refuse. Then, I'm a shinobi. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small gift of trust. Active duty? Naruto asked, keeping his tone casual as he began preparing her bowl. He planned this one in advance. A delicate shoyu base with seasonal vegetables, light but complex. Yes, that must be hard. Dangerous work, sometimes. A pause. But it's what I trained for. What I'm good at. There was something in her voice, not quite doubt, but maybe loneliness. Naruto set aside his cutting board and turned to face her fully. Can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to. She nodded, barely perceptible. Why do you come here? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad you do. But you're clearly trying not to be recognized. Most people who want anonymity don't become regulars anywhere. The silence stretched so long he thought he'd overstepped. Then she said, very quietly, because here, I can just be someone eating ramen. Not a clan heir, not a jonin, not someone with expectations and duties. Just a customer, clan heir. The word caught Naruto's attention, confirming his earlier guess about possible Hyuga connection. But he didn't push. I get that, he said instead. Wanting a place where you can just exist without all the roles you have to play. Do you? There was genuine curiosity in her voice. Yeah. Naruto turned back to his cooking, grateful for something to do with his hands. People look at me and see either the kid who could have been a shinobi, or the guy who makes their lunch. Sometimes I just want to be Naruto, you know? Not Naruto the almost genin, not Naruto the ramen chef. Just me. I understand, she said softly. More than you know. They fell into comfortable silence as he finished her bowl. When he placed it before her, their fingers brushed briefly. Hers were calloused in a way he recognized. The specific pattern that came from weapons training. Definitely a shinobi. Definitely someone with serious training. She ate with her usual quiet appreciation, and Naruto found himself stealing glances between tasks. There was something achingly familiar about her presence, like a word on the tip of his tongue that he couldn't quite grasp. When she finished and stood to leave, she hesitated. "Thank you," she said. "For understanding. And for the ramen." "Anytime," Naruto replied. "And I mean that. You're welcome here whenever you need a place to just be." After she left, Naruto realized she'd left slightly more money than the bowl cost. Not much, just enough to be noticeable. A tip, or maybe a thank you for more than just the food. He pocketed it with a smile. Friday evening brought Irika. Their weekly dinner had become a tradition over the years, one of the few constants in Naruto's life. Every Friday at 7 p.m., unless he was on a mission, Irika would push through the curtain with his warm smile and settle onto what had become his stool. "Naruto." Irika's greeting was as bright as ever, though Naruto could see the tiredness around his eyes. Teaching at the academy was demanding work. "How's my favorite ramen chef? Better now that you're here, Irika-sensei." Naruto grinned, already reaching for the ingredients for Irika's usual order. Over the years, he'd stopped asking what Irika wanted. They'd developed an unspoken understanding. "Rough week? You have no idea. I had to break up 3 fights, deal with 2 sets of angry parents, and somehow teach basic transformation jutsu to a class of 12-year-olds who think they're already prepared for Chunin exams." Irika loosened his hitate slightly. "Some days I miss field missions." "Liar," Naruto said affectionately, dropping noodles into boiling water. "You love those kids." "I do," Irika admitted. "But loving them doesn't make them less exhausting. There's this one student who reminds me of someone." He gave Naruto a pointed look. "Oh? Devastatingly handsome and talented? Loud, stubborn, and completely unable to sit still for more than 5 minutes." But Irika was smiling. "He's got potential, though. Reminds me of you at that age." The words should have stung. A reminder of what Naruto had lost. But coming from Irika, they felt almost fond. Irika was one of the few people who could reference Naruto's past without it feeling like pity or regret. Naruto slid the completed bowl across the counter. Miso ramen with extra char siu, green onions, and a perfectly soft boiled egg. Irika's comfort food. "You're a lifesaver," Irika said, breaking apart his chopsticks. He took his first bite and sighed with satisfaction. "This is exactly what I needed." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that only came from years of friendship. Naruto prepared his own bowl and joined Irika at the counter, something he rarely did during service hours. But Ayam had left for the day, and the dinner rush had died down. It was just the 2 of them. "So," Irika said eventually, "I heard something interesting at the academy this week." "Yeah? Rumor is that Sasuke was spotted near the border." Irika kept his voice casual, but he was watching Naruto carefully. Naruto's chopsticks stilled for just a moment. "Near Konoha's border? Apparently. Might be nothing, you know how rumors spread. But Sakura was called to the Hokage's office yesterday, and she came out looking determined. She's going after him again." It wasn't a question. "Probably." Irika took another bite of ramen. "I know it's complicated for you, hearing about him." "It's okay." And surprisingly it was. Sasuke had made his choice to leave 7 years ago, shortly before Naruto's accident. They'd never been friends, had barely spoken actually, but they'd been academy classmates. Parallel lines that might have intersected if things had been different. "I hope she finds what she's looking for. Whether that's bringing him back or just getting closure." "You're more philosophical about it than she is," Irika observed. "I've had a lot of time to think about choices and paths." Naruto twirled noodles around his chopsticks. "Sasuke chose to leave. I didn't choose to lose my dream of being a shinobi, but I chose what to do after. We're all just trying to find our way, right?" Irika studied him for a long moment, something soft in his expression. "You know, when Tucci first told me he'd offered you an apprenticeship, I wasn't sure it would work out." "Yeah?" Naruto tried to sound casual, but his heart rate picked up. "They didn't often talk about those early days. I thought you might be too angry, too hurt. That you'd quit after a week." Irika smiled. "I'm glad I was wrong. You've built something real here, Naruto. You should be proud." The words settled warm in Naruto's chest, but they also brought the weight of the current crisis. "Irika-sensei, can I ask you something?" "Always." If someone wanted to take away something important, not because they needed it, but because they thought they could use the space for something better, what would you do? Iruka set down his chopsticks, giving Naruto his full attention. This isn't hypothetical, is it? Naruto told him about Kobayashi's visit, about the Development Corporation and their plans. As he spoke, he watched Iruka's expression shift from concern to something harder, more calculating, the look of a shinobi assessing a threat. Have you talked to Tsuchi yet? Iruka asked when Naruto finished. Tomorrow. I and I are going to his house. Naruto slumped forward, elbows on the counter. I don't know what to do, sensei. We can't fight a corporation with powerful backing. We're just a ramen shop. You're not just anything, Iruka said firmly. And you're not alone in this. Ichiraku isn't just important to you, it's important to a lot of people in this village. Including some with influence of their own. You think people would actually fight for a ramen shop? I think people would fight for a place that's been feeding them and their families for 3 decades. I think they'd fight for a symbol of what makes Konoha special, not the clans or the power, but the community. Iruka put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. And I think you'd be surprised how many friends you've made over the years, just by doing what you do. Naruto felt his throat tighten. Thanks, sensei. Besides, Iruka added, his tone lightening slightly, if they try to tear this place down, they'll have to go through me. And I'm not the academy's top instructor for nothing. Despite everything, Naruto laughed. I'd pay to see you take on a corporation with kunai and lecture techniques. Never underestimate the power of a good lecture. Iruka finished his ramen and pushed the bowl forward. But seriously, Naruto, document everything. Every conversation, every meeting, and consider talking to Tsunade-sama directly. The Hokage's office should know if there are development plans this aggressive moving through the village. You think she doesn't know? I think there's a difference between approving development in general and understanding what specific projects are being pushed through. Sometimes these things get buried in paperwork and committee approvals. Iruka stood, stretching. I have some connections in the administrative office. Let me do some digging. Iruka-sensei, you don't have to. Your family, Naruto. Iruka said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. This shop is part of our history together. Of course I'm going to help. After Iruka left, refusing to let Naruto comp his meal, as always, Naruto cleaned up in a daze. Family. Iruka had called him family so easily, so naturally. He thought about his conversation with the hooded woman, about roles and expectations. Iruka had never been his sensei in any official capacity. The accident had happened before team assignments. But he'd claimed that role anyway. Had chosen to be family when he didn't have to be, the same way Tsuchi had chosen to offer him an apprenticeship. The same way Im had chosen to treat him as a partner rather than an obligation. Naruto had lost the family he'd imagined, the teams, the bonds forged through shared missions, the brotherhood of shinobi. But he'd gained a different family, quieter but no less real, and he'd be damned if he let anyone take that away. Saturday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Shikamaru Nara, looking as perpetually bored as ever, hands shoved in his pockets as he slouched through the entrance. Shikamaru! Naruto greeted him with genuine pleasure. They weren't close friends. Their paths had diverged too much after Naruto left the academy. But Shikamaru stopped by every few weeks, usually with the excuse that his mother had sent him on errands nearby. The usual? Yeah, and make it quick. I've got a strategy meeting in an hour. Shikamaru settled onto a stool with a sigh. Everything's always so troublesome. Strategy meeting on a Saturday? Naruto began assembling Shikamaru's preferred order, basic shoyu ramen, nothing fancy, efficient fuel more than culinary experience. Village security doesn't take weekends off. Shikamaru watched Naruto work with lazy interest. Especially lately. Oh? Naruto kept his tone casual, but his attention sharpened. Nothing specific, just increased tensions. Border skirmishes with Cloud, some weird intelligence reports from our spies in various villages. The Jonin commander has us running scenarios. Shikamaru accepted the bowl Naruto slid across the counter. Thanks. Sounds stressful. It's all troublesome politics. Shikamaru took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. Speaking of politics, I heard something interesting through my clan connections. Naruto's hand stilled in the middle of wiping down the counter. Yeah? There's a development corporation making moves in the commercial district. Sunrise something or other. Shikamaru's eyes, usually half-lidded and disinterested, were sharp as they studied Naruto. They approached you yet? 2 days ago. Naruto set down his cleaning cloth. How did you know? Because they'd been making noise at the clan council level, talking about modernization and increased revenue for the village. Getting buy-in from the people who matter. Shikamaru slurped some noodles. The Nara voted against supporting them, for what it's worth. Why? Because my dad did some digging, and the whole thing smells wrong. The corporation is new, only formed 6 months ago. The funding sources are murky, and the speed at which they've gotten approvals through the civilian council suggests someone with significant influence is pushing this. Naruto felt his stomach drop. How significant? Significant enough to bypass normal review processes. Significant enough that even asking questions about it gets you stonewalled. Shikamaru fixed Naruto with a serious look. I'm telling you this as a friend, be careful. Whatever this is, it's not just about real estate. Then what's it about? If I had to guess? Someone wants to reshape this part of the village, and Ichiraku's location is strategically valuable. Shikamaru finished his ramen, set down his chopsticks. Or someone wants to disrupt the social dynamics of this area. Your shop is a neutral ground. Shinobi and civilians mix here in a way they don't in many places. Some people might see that as a problem. That's insane, Naruto said flatly. We serve ramen. We're not staging a revolution. You're creating community, which can be more powerful than you think. Shikamaru stood, pulling out his wallet. Look, I don't have all the answers yet, but my dad asked me to warn you, don't sign anything, don't make any agreements, and document every interaction you have with these people. And maybe consider talking to the Hokage directly. Iruka said the same thing. Iruka's smart. Listen to him. Shikamaru paid for his meal. I'll see what else I can find out. But Naruto? Be prepared for this to get complicated. After Shikamaru left, Naruto stood in the empty shop, his mind churning. Strategic location. Social dynamics. Someone with significant influence. This was so far beyond his understanding. He'd left the shinobi world behind, or thought he had. But apparently the politics and power plays of that world didn't care whether you participated or not. The door curtain rustled, and a hooded figure stepped inside. She came earlier than usual, mid-afternoon instead of evening. Naruto looked up from where he was reorganizing supplies and felt something in his chest ease slightly. Her presence had become oddly grounding over the past week. You're early, he said, managing a smile. Not that I'm complaining. She took her usual seat, and even through the hood, he sensed her hesitation. I can come back later if... No, please. Stay. I could use the distraction, honestly. Naruto washed his hands and moved to the cooking station. Same deal as always? I choose. A nod. He selected his ingredients with extra care today, trying to channel his turbulent emotions into something productive. His hands moved through familiar motions, chopping, stirring, assembling, and the ritual of it calmed him slightly. Can I ask you something? He said as he worked. You're a shinobi, you said. Do you ever feel like the politics and power struggles get in the way of what you're actually trying to do? She was quiet for a moment. Often, she finally said. The clans, the councils, the competing interests. Sometimes it feels like the actual mission gets lost in all the maneuvering. Does it make you angry? Naruto asked, surprising himself with the question. Sometimes. But anger without direction is useless. There was something almost sad in her voice. I learned that a long time ago. How do you deal with it then? The frustration, the feeling of being caught up in things you can't control? Another pause. I find things that ground me. Places that remind me why I chose this path in the first place. People who see me, not just what I represent. Naruto plated her ramen, a complex bowl that had taken shape almost unconsciously, layers of flavor that somehow reflected his own complicated emotions. Is that why you come here? Yes, she said softly. You see people, Naruto. Not their roles or status. Just people. That's rare. The use of his name startled him, It was the first time she'd said it directly. You make that sound like a good thing, but right now it feels like a liability. People with power and status are trying to take this place away, and I don't know how to fight them. Fight them the way you know how, she said. Not with the weapons they use, but with your own strengths. I'm not strong. Strength isn't just physical power or political influence. She leaned forward slightly, and he caught a glimpse of pale eyes beneath the hood. Strength is also showing up every morning to make broth. It's caring about people's favorite orders. It's creating a space where a shinobi can take off her mask for a little while. The words hit him harder than he'd expected, and he had to turn away, blinking rapidly. Thank you, he managed. Thank you, she replied. For this place. For seeing people. For reminding me that there's value in the small, quiet things. She ate slowly, as always, and Naruto found himself working nearby, not quite ready to let her disappear back into anonymity. When she finished, she stood and placed her payment on the counter. Then she did something new. She pushed back her hood just far enough for him to see her face properly for the first time. Naruto's breath caught. She was beautiful in an understated way, pale skin, dark hair framing delicate features, and eyes that were unmistakably Hyuga, that distinctive lavender white. But more than her appearance, it was the expression on her face that stopped him, open, vulnerable, hopeful. Hi, he started, but she was already pulling the hood back up. Not yet, she said quietly. I'm not ready yet. But soon. I promise. Then she was gone, leaving Naruto staring after her with his heart pounding. A Hyuga. She was definitely a Hyuga, which meant she was part of one of the most powerful clans in Konoha. And she'd been coming here, hiding her identity, seeking refuge in his ramen shop. Why? The question nagged at him for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, after closing, Naruto sat alone in the shop with a cup of tea, staring at nothing. The week had been overwhelming. The Development Corporation's threat, the revelation of political machinations he didn't understand, Shikamaru's warning, the mystery of his hooded regular who'd finally shown him her face. And beneath it all, the question that had been haunting him since Kobayashi's visit, did he have the right to make decisions about Ichiraku's future? This wasn't just his shop. It was Tsuchi's legacy, the old man's life's work. Naruto was just the one who'd been given a second chance here. What if his stubborn refusal to sell was actually selfish? What if the smart thing, the right thing, was to take the money and let Tsuchi retire in comfort? The door curtain shifted, and Naruto looked up to find Tsuchi himself standing there. I am close behind him. Ayam told me we needed to talk, the old man said, his weathered face serious. About someone trying to buy my shop. Naruto stood quickly. Tsuchiya-san, I was going to come see you tomorrow, I know. But I decided not to wait. Tsuchi moved slowly to a stool, his arthritis clearly bothering him today. Tell me everything. So Naruto did. He laid out the whole situation. Kobayashi's visit, the implied threats, the information from Shikamaru about political backing, Irika's advice to contact the Hokage. Tsuchi listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Naruto finished, the old man was quiet for a long moment. Do you want to sell? Tsuchi finally asked. No. The word burst out of Naruto. God, no. This place it's everything to me. But it's not my decision to make. It's yours, is it? Tsuchi's eyes were gentle. Naruto, when I took you on 7 years ago, what did I tell you? Naruto's mind went back to that conversation in his cramped apartment. I'm not offering this out of pity. I'm offering because I think you'd be good at it, and because I genuinely need the help. You said you needed help, Naruto answered. That you thought I'd be good at this work. And have you been? I've tried to be. You've been more than good. Tsuchi leaned forward. You've brought new life to this shop, Naruto. You've innovated, experimented, built relationships with customers I'd never have reached. This place has thrived because of you. But it's still yours. It's ours, Tsuchi interrupted firmly. And if you're asking my opinion, I say we tell these development vultures to take their money and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Despite the tension, Naruto laughed, startled. Ayam giggled behind her hand. But Tsuchi continued, his expression sobering. If they've got the backing Shikamaru mentioned, this isn't going to be a simple fight. They'll try to make things difficult. Permits might get delayed, supply chains disrupted, inspections might suddenly become very thorough. We can handle that, Naruto said with more confidence than he felt. We can, I agreed, moving to stand beside her father. Because we're not alone. This shop has friends, Dad. Lots of them. Teuchi smiled, proud. Then I guess we're in agreement. Ichiraka stays right where it is. The relief that flooded through Naruto was physical, like a weight lifting from his shoulders. Thank you, he said quietly. For trusting me. For everything. Thank you for giving an old man a reason to believe in the future, Teuchi replied. Now, someone's going to need to talk to Tsunade-sama. And since I'm semi-retired, and has never met the Hokage, I'll do it, Naruto said. The thought of facing Tsunade was intimidating. She tried to heal him after the accident, had been there for one of the worst moments of his life, but this was necessary. I'll request an audience on Monday. Good. Teuchi stood slowly, steadying his arm. And Naruto? Don't let them make you feel small. You've built something important here. Don't forget that. After they left, Naruto sat alone in the darkened shop for a while longer. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant sounds of the village settling into sleep. He thought about the past week, the mysterious woman seeking refuge, the threat to his home, the reminders of the shinobi world he'd left behind but couldn't entirely escape, the convergence of his two lives, the one he'd lost and the one he'd built. Strength isn't just physical power or political influence, the hooded woman had said. Strength is also showing up every morning to make broth. Naruto had spent 7 years believing he'd lost his chance at strength when he lost his shinobi path. But maybe, he'd been building a different kind of strength all along. The strength of consistency, of care, of community. Tomorrow he'd wake at 3:30, start the broth at 4, open the shop at 11. He'd serve customers, listen to their stories, remember their favorite orders. He'd do the work that didn't look like heroism but felt, increasingly, like it mattered. And on Monday, he'd march into the Hokage's office and fight for his home the only way he knew how, with honesty, determination, and the stubborn refusal to give up that had defined him since childhood. Some things, it seemed, didn't change, even when everything else did. Naruto locked up the shop, running his hand along the worn wooden counter one last time before turning off the lights. In the darkness, he could almost hear the echoes of decades of conversations, laughter, the sizzle of cooking, the quiet moments of connection between chef and customer. This was worth fighting for. He stepped out into the cool night air, locking the door behind him. Above, the stars were brilliant against the dark sky, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. The future was uncertain. The fight ahead would be difficult. But Naruto had learned, over 7 years of early mornings and late nights, of burns and cuts and perfectly crafted bowls of ramen, that the best things were worth the struggle. He'd lost his first dream at 12 years old, shattered as thoroughly as his chakra network. But at 19, standing in front of the shop that had saved his life, Naruto realized he'd found something just as valuable, a purpose that was entirely his own, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it away, not without a fight. Meanwhile, across the village, a figure in a hooded cloak made her way through empty streets, her steps quick and sure despite the darkness. Hinata Hyuga had been watching Naruto Uzumaki for 7 years. She'd watched him break after the accident, the way his bright energy had dimmed, the way he'd shrunk into himself, lost and grieving. She'd wanted to reach out then, but what could she say? She'd been a shy 12-year-old who could barely speak to him when he was happy. How could she approach him in his darkest moment? So she'd watched from afar as Teuchi offered him an apprenticeship. Watched as he slowly rebuilt himself, trading orange jumpsuits for aprons, kunai for kitchen knives. Watched as he found a new way to shine, quieter than before but no less bright. She'd been away on missions for years, climbing the ranks to Jonin, making her father proud in the way he never thought possible. But whenever she returned to Konoha, she found herself drawn to Ichiraku, unable to stay away from the boy, now a man, who'd inspired her to be strong. And finally, 2 weeks ago, she'd gathered her courage and walked through that door curtain. Still hiding, still afraid, but present in a way she'd never managed when they were young. He didn't recognize her. Of course he didn't. She'd changed, grown taller, stronger, confident in ways that would have been unimaginable at 12. And he never really looked at her before, not when they were in the academy together. But he saw her now. Not her name or her clan or her status, but her, the person beneath all those labels. He created food specifically for her, listened to her veiled confessions, made her feel safe in a way she'd never experienced. Today she'd shown him her face. Not long enough for recognition, but it was a start. Soon, she promised herself. Soon she'd tell him who she was, would explain why she'd been hiding. She just hoped he'd understand. Hinata slipped through the gates of the Hyuga compound, past guards who bowed respectfully to their clan heir, and made her way to her private quarters. Her room was austere, befitting her station, but on her desk sat a small collection of take-out containers from Ichiraku. She should throw them away. They served no purpose, but she kept them anyway, these small pieces of connection to the boy who'd never known she existed, who'd grown into a man who saw her without knowing her name. Tomorrow she'd return to the shop. And the day after that. And eventually, when she'd built up enough courage, she'd push back that hood and say the words she'd been carrying for 7 years. Naruto-kun, it's me. It's Hinata. But not yet. Not quite yet. For now, she'd savor these stolen moments of anonymity. These conversations where she could be honest without the weight of her name. Where she could be just a customer, and he could be just a ramen chef, and between them could exist something pure and uncomplicated. Soon, she promised herself as she prepared for bed. Soon. But tonight, she'd fall asleep thinking about the way he looked when he told her she was welcome anytime, the genuine warmth in his blue eyes, the gentle strength in his scarred hands. Tomorrow, she'd be Hyuga Hinata again, clan heir, Jonin, the Byakugan princess. But in the quiet hours before dawn, she could just be the girl who loved ramen, who loved the boy who made it, who was finally, finding the courage to bridge the distance between them, one bowl at a time. The Hokage's tower loomed above Naruto as he stood at its base Monday morning, trying to calm his racing heart. He'd been here before, once, memorably, after the accident, when Tsunade had examined him with her legendary medical expertise and delivered the verdict that had shattered his world. The memory of her face, frustrated and sympathetic as she'd explained that even she couldn't repair the damage to his chakra network, still made his chest tight. Going back felt like voluntarily opening an old wound. But Tucci was counting on him. Ayam was counting on him. Hell, the entire shop, his entire life, depended on this. Naruto squared his shoulders and walked through the entrance. The interior was controlled chaos, as always. Chunin hurried past with mission reports, Jonin discussed assignments in low voices, and administrative staff moved between offices with armfuls of paperwork. The machinery of Konoha's Shinobi system in full motion. Once, Naruto had dreamed of being part of this. Now he moved through it like a ghost, present but not belonging. Can I help you? The receptionist was a young woman Naruto didn't recognize, probably new to the position. She looked at him with polite disinterest, just another civilian with business at the tower. I need to request an audience with the Hokage, Naruto said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. It's regarding village development and a business matter. The receptionist's expression shifted to something like pity. I'm sorry, but the Hokage's schedule is extremely full. You'll need to file a formal petition with the civilian council, and they'll review. Tell her it's Naruto Uzumaki. A new voice cut through the conversation. Naruto turned to find Shizen, Tsunade's assistant, standing behind him with a stack of folders in her arms. She'll want to see him. But Shizen-sama, the schedule. I'll handle it. Shizen gave Naruto a small smile. Come on, Naruto. I'll take you up. They climbed the stairs in silence, Shizen's heels clicking against the stone. Finally, she said, I heard about the development corporation. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. How did you? Naruto started then stopped. Of course she'd know. Shizen knew everything that happened in the tower. Thank you for getting me in to see her. Tsunade-sama has been expecting you, actually. Iruka filed a formal inquiry about the development project on Friday. Shizen paused outside the Hokage's office. Fair warning, she's in a mood today. Budget meetings. Before Naruto could respond, Shizen knocked and pushed open the door. Tsunade sat behind her massive desk, looking exactly as Naruto remembered, ageless beauty courtesy of her transformation jutsu, honey-colored eyes that could shift from warm to terrifying in an instant, and an expression of profound irritation as she glared at the paperwork covering her desk. "Shizen, if this is another requisition form from the academy, I swear I'm going to..." She looked up and stopped. "Naruto, Hokage-sama." Naruto bowed, formal and respectful. His hands were sweating. Tsunade's expression softened slightly, though the weariness remained. "Sit down." "Shizen, hold my other appointments for 30 minutes. "Yes, ma'am." Shizen retreated, closing the door behind her. Naruto sat in one of the chairs facing the desk, feeling small despite his 19 years. This woman had tried to save him, had used every technique in her considerable arsenal to repair his shattered chakra network, and had ultimately failed. The memory of her frustration, "Damn it, why won't this work?" still echoed in his mind. "I assume you're here about Ichiraku," Tsunade said, steepling her fingers. Irika's inquiry was illuminating. "Then you know about Sunrise Development Corporation trying to buy our property? I know they've acquired most of the block." Tsunade pulled a file from her desk. "I also know they have approval from the Civilian Council for their redevelopment plan, pending acquisition of all properties in the designated zone. But you're the Hokage," Naruto said, trying to keep desperation from his voice. "Can't you stop them? It's not that simple." Tsunade leaned back in her chair, and for a moment she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with paperwork. "The Civilian Council has authority over commercial development that doesn't impact village security. They argue, correctly in legal terms, that modernizing the commercial district will increase revenue and improve infrastructure, at the cost of destroying businesses that have been there for decades." "I know." Tsunade's voice was sharp. "You think I like this? But I have to balance multiple interests, Naruto. The Civilian Council wants development. Several shinobi clans support it because they've been promised favorable commercial opportunities in the new complex. And frankly, the village does need increased revenue." Naruto felt his heart sinking. "So you're going to let them do it?" "I didn't say that." Tsunade stood and moved to the window overlooking the village. "I said it's complicated. There are processes, Naruto. Even as Hokage, I can't simply overrule the Civilian Council without cause." "But..." She turned to face him. "If there were irregularities in how the project was approved, or if the corporation engaged in harassment or illegal pressure tactics, that would give me grounds to intervene." Understanding dawned. "You want me to document everything. I want you to protect yourself and your business within the bounds of the law." Tsunade returned to her desk. "Which means keeping records of every interaction with Sunrise Development. Every threat, every pressure tactic, every suspicious incident. If they step over the line, I'll have the justification I need. And if they don't? If they just wait us out? Make things difficult until we have to sell?" Tsunade was quiet for a moment. "Then you'll have to give them a reason to back off. Prove that Ichiraku is more valuable to the village as it is than as part of their development." "How?" Naruto heard the frustration in his own voice. "We're just a ramen shop. You're more than that, and you know it." Tsunade's gaze was intense. "Ichiraku is one of the few places in this village where shinobi and civilians mix freely, where clan boundaries don't matter, where a genin fresh from the academy sits next to a jonin commander, and they're both just customers. That kind of social cohesion is valuable, Naruto. Remind people of that." Naruto absorbed this, his mind already turning. "So if we could show that the community needs Ichiraku, then the Civilian Council might reconsider their support for the development. At least for your property specifically." Tsunade shuffled some papers on her desk. "I can't promise anything, Naruto, but I can promise I'll look for any legitimate reason to protect your shop. Politics is the art of finding leverage points." Naruto stood, bowing deeply. "Thank you, Hokage-sama. Don't thank me yet. This isn't going to be easy." Tsunade's expression gentled slightly. "How are you, Naruto? I know we haven't spoken since you tried to fix me?" The words came out more bitter than intended. "I'm okay. Good, actually. The shop, it's been good for me. I can see that." Tsunade studied him with her medical expert's eye. "You've grown. Not just physically. You carry yourself differently. I had good teachers." Naruto managed a smile. Tuchiajizan, I am Mizan, Iraka-sensei. They taught me that there's more than one way to matter. Something flickered across Tsunade's face. Approval, maybe, or sadness. They're right. And Naruto? For what it's worth, I'm sorry I couldn't heal you. I still think about it sometimes, wonder if there was something I missed. The admission surprised him. The legendary Tsunade, one of the Sannin, admitting to regret. It wasn't your fault, Naruto said quietly. What happened to me? It was Mizuki's fault. And maybe mine, for being too reckless. But not yours. That's generous of you. Tsunade looked out the window again. I tried to heal you because I saw myself in you, I think. Someone who'd lost something important, and was drowning in grief. I wanted to fix it, to give you back what was taken. When I couldn't. She trailed off. You gave me something else instead, Naruto said. You gave me the truth. You didn't lie and say there was false hope. That let me move forward, eventually. So thank you for that. Tsunade turned back to him, and there was moisture in her eyes that she blinked away impatiently. Get out of here before you make me cry, kid. And send me a bowl of your miso ramen sometime. I hear you've gotten good. The best in Konoha, Naruto said with mock arrogance, and was rewarded with Tsunade's bark of laughter. That's more like it. Now go save your shop. Naruto walked back to Ichiraku in a daze, his mind churning. Tsunade had given him a path forward, but it was narrow and uncertain. He needed to prove the shop's value to the community, needed to document any wrongdoing by the corporation, needed to find leverage in a fight against people with far more power than him. It felt impossible. It felt exactly like the old days, when everyone had told him he couldn't become Hokage because he was the dead last, the troublemaker, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Though he hadn't known that part then, he'd faced impossible odds before. The difference was that back then, he believed sheer determination could overcome anything. Now he knew better. Determination needed strategy, needed support, needed a recipe. The thought struck him as he rounded the corner and saw Ichiraku's familiar curtains. A recipe. A new signature dish that would remind people what made this place special, that would draw crowds and create buzz and demonstrate the shop's unique value. Something bold. Something innovative. Something that could only come from Ichiraku. By the time he pushed through the curtains, an idea was already forming. Ayam looked up from where she was prepping vegetables. How did it go with Tsunade-sama? She can't directly stop the development, but she'll help if we can prove the shop's value or if the corporation breaks any laws. Naruto tied on his apron with sharp, decisive movements, which means we need to make some noise. Remind Konoha why Ichiraku matters. How? Ayam set down her knife. A new signature ramen. Something spectacular. Something that gets people talking and brings them through the doors in droves. Naruto moved to the preparation area, his mind already cataloging ingredients and possibilities. Something that shows we're not just holding on to the past, we're innovating, creating, contributing to Konoha's culinary culture. Ayam's eyes widened. You want to create an entirely new ramen? From scratch? Not just new. Revolutionary. Naruto pulled out his notebook, the one where he'd been recording experimental ideas for years. Tuchiajizan built this shop on tradition and consistency. Those are our foundations. But we can build something new on top of that foundation, something that honors the past while looking forward. That's ambitious, Ayam said, but she was smiling. What did you have in mind? Naruto flipped through his notes, pages full of scribbled ideas and failed experiments. I've been thinking about this for a while, actually. A broth that combines tonkatsu richness with the clarity of a chintan. Noodles with a custom flour blend that gives them more bite. Toppings that are traditional but elevated. And a secret ingredient that pulls it all together. What secret ingredient? I don't know yet. Naruto grinned, feeling the first real excitement he'd had since Kobayashi's visit. That's what I need to figure out. They discussed possibilities as they worked through the morning prep, Naruto's notebook filling with new ideas. The lunch rush interrupted their planning, but between customers, Naruto found himself observing more closely than usual, noting what people ordered, what they responded to, what made them close their eyes in satisfaction. Ichiraku's strength had always been in reading people, and understanding what they needed before they knew themselves. His new ramen needed to capture that essence. The lunch crowd was thinning when the door curtain flew open with more force than necessary, and a familiar voice shouted, "Naruto Nizan." Naruto looked up to find Konohamaru Sarutobi barreling toward the counter, his Hittite askew and his face split in a huge grin. Behind him came two other genin, a girl with pink hair pulled into side ponytails and a boy with glasses and a serious expression. "Konohamaru!" Naruto couldn't help but return the grin. "Congratulations on graduating. I heard you made genin last month." "Damn right I did." Konohamaru struck a pose that was clearly meant to be cool but came off as endearingly dorky. "I'm officially a shinobi now." "Team Ebisu," the girl rolled her eyes. "He's been like this for weeks." "I'm Moegi, and this is Udan. We're on his team, unfortunately." "Hey!" Konohamaru protested. "You should be honored to be on the same team as the future Hokage." The words hit Naruto like a physical blow, though he tried not to show it. Future Hokage. How many times had he said the same thing at that age? Future Hokage, huh? Naruto kept his voice light. "That's a big dream. You three want some ramen?" First bowls on the house for the new genin. "Really?" Konohamaru's eyes lit up. "Awesome. Can I get the spicy miso with extra everything?" "Show you for me, please," Moegi said politely. "Same," Udan added quietly. Naruto set to work, hyper-aware of Konohamaru watching his every move. The kid had been following him around since he was barely old enough to walk, declaring Naruto his rival and role model. That hero worship had continued even after the accident, though Naruto had never quite understood why. What was inspiring about someone who'd failed before they even started? "Naruto Nizan," Konohamaru said as Naruto assembled his bowl, "our sensei says you used to train with the academy students. That you were really good at taijutsu." "I am," shot Naruto a concerned glance, but he kept his expression neutral. "That was a long time ago. But you were good, right? Iruka-sensei says you had more determination than anyone he'd ever taught." "Determination doesn't mean much if you can't follow through," Naruto said, sliding the completed bowls across the counter. "Enjoy." But Konohamaru wasn't deterred. "Why did you stop?" "Training, I mean." "Just because you can't be a field shinobi doesn't mean, Konohamaru." Moegi's voice was sharp. "That's personal." "What?" "I'm just asking." Konohamaru looked genuinely confused. "Naruto Nizan is amazing. He runs this whole shop, makes the best ramen in the village. Everyone knows him. I just don't get why he gave up on shinobi stuff entirely." Naruto felt Iam's protective presence beside him, ready to intervene, but he held up a hand. Konohamaru wasn't being cruel, just thoughtless in the way kids often were. "I didn't give up," Naruto said carefully. "I changed direction." "There's a difference. But don't you miss it?" Konohamaru pressed. "The training, the missions, the chance to prove yourself?" "Sometimes," Naruto admitted. "But Konohamaru, there's more than one way to prove yourself. More than one way to contribute to the village, I guess." Konohamaru took a bite of his ramen, chewed thoughtfully. "But being a shinobi is the coolest. We just completed our first C-rank mission last week. Nothing too dangerous, just escorting a merchant, but it was still awesome. And eventually we'll take the Chunin exams and then..." "Konohamaru," Udan interrupted quietly. "I think Naruto-san might not want to hear about all this." "Why not?" "Oh." Understanding dawned on Konohamaru's face, followed by mortification. "Oh man. I'm sorry, Naruto Nizan. I wasn't thinking." "It's fine," Naruto said, and meant it mostly. "I'm happy for you guys. Really. How's your team dynamic? You three working well together?" Moegi and Udan exchanged glances. "It's a work in progress," Moegi said diplomatically. "They don't appreciate my leadership style," Konohamaru declared. "Your leadership style is charging in without a plan," Udan pointed out. "At least I take action instead of overthinking everything." "You call thinking overthinking." "Hey!" Naruto's voice cut through their bickering. "Both of you. Listen to me." He leaned on the counter, making sure he had their full attention. "You know what makes a good team? It's not having the same strengths. It's having complementary ones." The three genin stared at him. "Konohamaru, you're bold and decisive. That's valuable. Someone needs to make the hard calls and push forward. But Udan's caution and Moigi's level-headedness keep you from getting killed doing something reckless. Naruto shifted his attention. And you too, you provide strategy and balance. But without Konohamaru's willingness to act, you might get stuck in analysis paralysis. How do you know all this? Moigi asked. I thought you never had a genin team. The question stung, but Naruto kept his voice steady. I didn't. But I've been watching teams come through this shop for 7 years. I've seen what works and what doesn't. The best teams aren't the ones where everyone is the same, they're the ones where different strengths balance each other out. Konohamaru set down his chopsticks. That's actually really smart, Naruto Nizan. Plus, Naruto continued, warming to the subject, you need to trust each other. Not just in combat, but in everything. Trust that when Udan says wait, he's seeing something you missed. Trust that when Moigi disagrees with you, she's trying to help, not undermine. Trust that when Konohamaru says go, sometimes you need to follow his instinct. The 3 genin were quiet, absorbing this. Finally, Moigi said, our sensei talks about teamwork, but he mostly focuses on formation techniques and tactical coordination. This is different. Tactics matter, Naruto agreed. But the emotional stuff matters too. Maybe more. You can have perfect formations, but if you don't actually trust and respect each other, you'll fall apart when things get hard. Is that from experience? Udan asked carefully. Naruto smiled sadly. No. That's from watching other people's experience and learning from it. He straightened, reaching for his cleaning cloth. But take the advice anyway. You 3 have something special. You've known each other since you were kids, right? That's a foundation. Build on it. The genin finished their ramen in thoughtful silence, occasionally glancing at each other with new consideration. When they stood to leave, Konohamaru paused. Naruto Nizan, I'm sorry I was being insensitive earlier. About the shinobi stuff, you weren't insensitive. You were just being yourself. Naruto ruffled Konohamaru's hair, earning an indignant squawk. And I like yourself, even when you're tactless. Now get out of here and go be the future Hokage. After they left, I am moved to stand beside him. That was good advice. Where did it come from? Honestly? No idea. Naruto wiped down the counter. But watching them reminded me of something. They're all so different, but together they could be really strong, if they learn to appreciate their differences instead of fighting them. Kind of like a good ramen, I am mused. Different ingredients that complement each other. Naruto stopped wiping. Say that again. Different ingredients that complement each other? That's it. Excitement sparked in Naruto's chest. That's the concept for the new ramen. Not trying to make one perfect ingredient, but combining different elements that shouldn't work together but do. Tradition and innovation. Richness and clarity. Familiar and surprising. A ramen that represents balance, I said slowly. I like it. I need to start experimenting. Tonight, after we close. Naruto, you can't push yourself too hard. You already work 14-hour days. This is important, I am Nizan. We need something that will make Konoha sit up and take notice. Naruto's mind was already racing ahead, planning. Give me a week. If I can't crack it in a week, I'll take a break. Promise. I looked skeptical but nodded. 1 week. But I'm checking on you to make sure you actually sleep. The afternoon service passed in a blur as Naruto's mind worked on the problem. He observed every bowl he served with new intensity, noting successful combinations and failed ones. The businessman who always ordered the same conservative shoyu, what would make him try something new? The academy students who came in groups, seeking adventure in their food choices, what would satisfy their desire for novelty while still feeling like comfort food? Around 4 p.m., a well-dressed woman Naruto didn't recognize stepped through the curtain. She had the sharp, assessing look of someone used to evaluating things, and she didn't sit at the counter. Instead, she stood, hands clasped in front of her. Are you Naruto Uzumaki? She asked. Naruto's instincts prickled. That's me. Can I help you? I'm Tanaka, representing Sunrise Development Corporation. She pulled out a business card, different from Kobayashi's, but the same company. I wanted to follow up on our previous conversation and see if you'd reconsidered our offer. We haven't, Naruto said firmly. And I'd appreciate it if your company stopped sending representatives. Mr. Uzumaki, I don't think you understand the situation. Tanaka's smile didn't reach her eyes. We're prepared to move forward with the development with or without your cooperation. It would be much easier for everyone if you sold voluntarily. Is that a threat? It's a fact. We have approval for the project. Your property is the only holdout in the designated zone. There are legal mechanisms for dealing with that. Then use them, Naruto said, his voice hardening. But until you do, this shop stays open, and I'd like you to leave. Tanaka's expression cooled. You're making this difficult for no reason. The shop will be closed one way or another. We're offering you compensation for that inevitability. Most people would be grateful. I'm not most people. No, you're a failed shinobi running a ramen stand. The words were calculated to wound. With no political connections, no influential backers, and no legal recourse. Fighting us is pointless. Naruto felt his hands curl into fists beneath the counter, his old temper flaring. But he forced himself to breathe, to channel that anger into something productive. Are you finished? He asked coldly. Because you're disrupting my business, and I have customers to serve. Tanaka pulled out an envelope and placed it on the counter. Legal notice of our intent to pursue eminent domain proceedings if you don't sell voluntarily within 30 days. Have a nice day, Mr. Uzumaki. After she left, Naruto stared at the envelope like it might bite him. Eminent domain, the village's legal right to seize property for public use. He'd heard of it but never imagined it could apply to him. I am emerged from the kitchen, having clearly heard everything. Naruto, it's fine. His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. This is what Tsunade warned us about. They're escalating. What do? We document it. Naruto picked up the envelope carefully. And we fight back the only way we can, by proving we're too valuable to lose. He pulled out his notebook and wrote down every detail of the interaction while it was fresh. Tanaka's name, the time, what she'd said, the threatening implications. If this went to legal proceedings, he'd need evidence. The shop felt different for the rest of the afternoon, somehow, like the walls were less solid, the future less certain. Naruto moved through the motions of service mechanically, his mind elsewhere. 30 days. They had 30 days to prove their value or face legal seizure of the property. It wasn't enough time. It had to be enough time. That night, after Ayam reluctantly went home, Naruto locked the front entrance and retreated to the kitchen. He'd sent Tuchi a message about the new development, but insisted the old man stay home and rest. There was nothing he could do tonight, and his arthritis didn't need distress. Alone in the kitchen, Naruto spread out his ingredients like a shinobi planning a mission. He had his various broths, tonkatsu, chicken shinton, dashi, his experimental mushroom stock, noodles of different thicknesses and flour blends. Toppings ranging from traditional to unconventional. Okay, he muttered to himself. Balance. Complementary opposites. Tradition and innovation. He started with the broth, the foundation of everything. The tonkatsu was rich, almost heavy, pure comfort. The chinton was delicate, refined, elegant satisfaction. What if he combined them? It shouldn't work. The heavy fat content of tonkatsu would overpower the subtle flavors of chinton. But what if he could find a ratio that let both shine? Naruto began experimenting, measuring carefully. Too much tonkatsu, and the bowl became muddy. Too much chinton and it lost body. He adjusted, tasted, adjusted again. Hours passed. The kitchen grew warm with steam. Naruto's notebook filled with ratios and observations. 70 to 30 tonkatsu/chinton. Too heavy, 50 to 50. Confused palate, 60 to 40 with kombu. Closer, but missing brightness. Around midnight he tried adding a splash of yuzu juice to cut the richness. The citrus brightened the broth immediately, but now it needed something to ground it again. He reached for his mushroom stock, adding just a small amount for earthiness. Better. Definitely better, but still not right. Naruto sat back, rubbing his eyes. What was he missing? The broth was good, better than good, but it wasn't transcendent. It wasn't the kind of thing that would make people talk, that would draw crowds. He thought about Konohamaru's team, about his own advice. Complementary strengths. Things that shouldn't work together but do. What ingredients seemed contradictory but might actually enhance each other? His eyes fell on the container of white miso, then shifted to the high-quality soy sauce he reserved for special occasions. Miso was earthy, funky, aggressive. Soy sauce was clean, umami-rich, refined. They were almost opposites in the flavor spectrum. What if Naruto prepared a small tear using both, blending them with sake, mirin, and a touch of sugar? He added it to a cup of his experimental broth, stirred, and lifted the bowl to his nose. The aroma hit him immediately, complex, layered, familiar yet surprising. He took a small sip. Oh, the flavors unfolded in waves, the initial richness of tonkatsu giving way to the delicate clarity of chinten, the miso's earthiness balanced by the soy sauce's refinement, the yuzu providing brightness without overwhelm, the mushroom stock grounding everything with subtle depth. It was chaotic and harmonious at once. It shouldn't work, but it did, each element supporting and elevating the others. Yes, Naruto breathed. This is it. He spent the next hour refining the ratios, documenting everything precisely. The tear needed exact proportions to maintain balance. The broth required a specific temperature to properly showcase the layered flavors. The assembly would need to be done in a particular order to build the complexity properly. By the time he perfected the base, it was past 2 a.m. Naruto should have been exhausted, but adrenaline kept him going. He still needed to figure out the noodles and toppings, elements that would complement the sophisticated broth rather than competing with it. For the noodles, he decided on a medium thickness with high hydration, enough body to stand up to the broth but not so much that they dominated. He mixed the test batch using bread flour and whole wheat in a ratio he'd been wanting to try, kneading until his arms ached. Toppings would be traditional in ingredients but elevated in execution. Char siu, but made with a special glaze. Ajitsu tamago, but marinated in the new tear for deeper flavor integration. Green onions, but grilled first to add smoky sweetness. Menma, but quick pickled with yuzu zest. And one non-traditional element, a small amount of truffle oil, drizzled at the very end to add unexpected luxury. Naruto assembled a complete test bowl around 3:30 a.m., his hands moving with the automatic precision of exhaustion. When he finally sat down to taste it, the shop was utterly silent except for the distant sounds of the village sleeping. He took his first proper bite, noodles, broth, toppings all together, and felt something in his chest unfurl. This was it. This was the ramen that would save Ichiraku. It was bold and balanced, traditional and innovative, comforting and surprising. It represented everything the shop stood for: respect for the past with eyes on the future, accessibility with excellence, community through craft. He needed a name for it. Something that captured its essence. The unbreakable bowl, he thought suddenly. Because no matter how much pressure they faced, Ichiraku wouldn't break. They'd bend, adapt, evolve, but they wouldn't break. Naruto pulled out his notebook with trembling hands and began writing down the complete recipe, every step documented in precise detail. This would be his signature dish, the thing that put his own mark on Ichiraku's legacy. He was so absorbed in his documentation that he didn't hear the door until a voice said, "You're here very late." Naruto's head snapped up to find the hooded figure standing just inside the kitchen entrance. In his exhausted state, he'd forgotten to lock the back door after taking out the trash. "How did you?" he started. The door was open. "I'm sorry, I should have knocked." She moved closer, and even through the hood, he could sense her concern. "Naruto, it's almost 4 in the morning. Have you been here all night?" "I've been working on something important." He gestured to the chaos of his workstation, dirty bowls and utensils everywhere, ingredients spread out, his notebook covered in frantic handwriting. "A new ramen. I think I finally got it right." She moved closer, studying the test bowl still sitting on the counter. "May I? It's cold now, but sure." She picked up the bowl and tasted it carefully, despite the temperature. Naruto watched her face, or what he could see of it, for any reaction. She set down the bowl slowly. "This is extraordinary," she said quietly. "The complexity, the balance, I've never tasted anything like it." Pride bloomed warm in Naruto's chest. "Thank you? I'm calling it the Unbreakable Bowl. That's a powerful name. It needs to be." Before he could stop himself, the whole story came tumbling out: the development corporation, the legal threats, The 30-day deadline, Tsunade's advice, his plan to prove the shop's value through innovation. The words poured out in an exhausted rush, and she listened silently, that quality of stillness he'd come to associate with her. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You're not alone in this fight, you know." "I know. I have Tsuchiya-jin, I am Mizan Irika-sensei. Friends who are helping. You have more than that." She moved closer, and something in her posture was intense, urgent. "You have an entire community that cares about this place. People who've been coming here for years, whose lives have been touched by what you do. They would fight for you if they knew you needed them. I can't ask people to fight my battles. It's not just your battle." Her voice was passionate now, more emotion than he'd ever heard from her. Ichiraku is part of Konoha's heart. It's where shinobi and civilians meet as equals. It's where people find comfort after hard missions, celebrate victories, mourn losses. It's where... She paused, and her voice softened. "It's where people remember what they're fighting for." Naruto stared at her, struck by the depth of feeling in her words. "You sound like you're talking from experience." "I am." She was very close now, close enough that he could see the pale column of her throat, the fall of dark hair from beneath her hood. "This shop has meant more to me than you could possibly know." "Then tell me." Naruto heard the plea in his own voice. "Tell me who you are. Why you care so much. Why you come here hiding your face." She was silent so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly he had to strain to hear, "Because I've been watching you for 7 years, Naruto. Watching you rebuild yourself into someone remarkable. And I was too afraid to approach you as myself, so I came as a stranger. As someone who could just appreciate your ramen without the weight of history." 7 years? Naruto's mind reeled. "But that means, you knew me before." "Before the accident, yes." "Who are you?" he asked again, gentle now. She reached up slowly, and Naruto's heart pounded as she pushed back her hood completely. Even though he'd caught a glimpse before, seeing her face fully in the dim kitchen light was different. The delicate features, the pale eyes that marked her as unmistakably Hyuga, the expression of vulnerability and hope and fear. She was beautiful, and she was looking at him like he was something precious. "I'm someone who believed in you when we were 12, she said softly. "Someone who never stopped believing, even when your path changed. Someone who," she broke off, seeming to gather courage. "Someone who wants to help you fight for this place. If you'll let me." "But I don't even know your name," Naruto said, though something in his mind was stirring, a half-formed recognition. "You will. Soon." She pulled her hood back up, and the moment of intimacy passed. "But first, you need to sleep. You're exhausted, and you have a shop to run in a few hours. I need to prep for morning service, Naruto." She put a hand on his arm, and even through his sleeve, he felt the contact like electricity. "Rest. A few hours. This battle will still be here when you wake up." She was right, and his body was beginning to crash from the adrenaline high. "Okay," he conceded. "But will you come back?" "Tomorrow? I'll come back." There was a smile in her voice. "I always come back." She moved toward the exit, then paused. "The unbreakable bowl is going to succeed, Naruto. Not just because it's delicious, though it is, but because it represents what you do best, taking broken things and making them whole. Balancing opposites. Creating harmony from chaos. How did you?" But she was already gone, slipping out the back door like a shadow. Naruto stood alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of his night's work, and felt something shift in his chest. The mysterious woman wasn't just a customer. She was someone from his past, someone who'd known him before, someone who cared enough to watch over him for 7 years. Who could that be? His exhausted brain couldn't puzzle it out, but something told him the answer was obvious, just outside his grasp. Tomorrow. He'd think about it tomorrow. For now, he needed to follow her advice and get some sleep. He had a new signature ramen to perfect, a shop to save, and apparently, a mystery to solve. Naruto cleaned up his workstation with the last of his energy, carefully storing his experimental broth and noting exactly where he'd left off. Then he locked up the shop properly and stumbled to his apartment, collapsing on his bed still in his work clothes. As he drifted off, His last thought was of pale eyes and a quiet voice saying, "I've been watching you for 7 years. Someone had been watching him. Believing in him. Waiting for the right moment to step out of the shadows. And tomorrow, or later today, technically, he'd begin the fight to save everything he'd built." But for the first time since Kobayashi had walked through his door, Naruto felt something like hope. He wasn't alone. He had his family at the shop, his friends in the village, his regular customers who depended on him, and he had a mysterious woman with pale eyes who believed in him, who saw something in his ramen, in him, worth fighting for. It was enough. It had to be enough. Across the village, Hinata Hyuga sat in her room, her hood finally pushed back, her heart racing. She'd almost told him. The words had been right there, "I'm Hinata." But she'd seen his exhaustion, the weight he was carrying, the fight ahead of him. Adding the complexity of her identity to that burden had felt selfish. Soon, she promised herself. After they'd won this battle. After he'd proven what she already knew, that he was extraordinary, shinobi or not. After she'd helped him save his shop, not as Hinata Hyuga, clan heir and jonin, but as a friend who believed in what he was building. Then she'd tell him everything. Her childhood admiration, her years of watching from afar, her growing feelings that had never faded despite time and distance. But first, she had work to do. Hinata pulled out a scroll and began writing names, influential people she knew, clan members she could appeal to, fellow jonin who'd spent time at Ichiraku over the years. If Naruto needed community support to prove the shop's value, she'd mobilize that community, quietly, without him knowing the source. Just as she'd been doing for 7 years. Some might call it obsessive, the way she'd kept track of him, checking on the shop whenever she was in the village, listening to gossip about how he was doing, celebrating his small victories from afar. But Hinata knew it was something else, devotion. The same devotion that had made her change her own path when she saw his courage. The same devotion that had sustained her through difficult missions when she remembered the boy who never gave up. Naruto thought he'd lost everything at 12. But he'd gained something too, whether he knew it or not, her unwavering faith that he would find his way to greatness, whatever form that took. And now, finally, she could help him prove it to the rest of the village. Hinata continued writing late into the night, planning her quiet campaign. By dawn, she had a strategy. 30 days to save Ichiraku? They'd do it in 20. Because Naruto Uzumaki wasn't the only one who knew something about determination, about refusing to give up, about protecting precious people. He'd taught her that, after all. Now it was time to return the favor.